Well, very excited for an afternoon tea with Shandy. How are you
Yes,
feeling?
feeling pretty good nearing the end of this season. As you mentioned earlier, this is a very relationship focused, heavy episode.
It is. I know. I felt very frustrated watching this episode the whole time. It's kind of a continuation, I think, of the last episode and the aftermath of it, but they're really unpacking, I think, the relationship dynamics, and I
Yeah.
had a lot of feelings during it.
Yeah. It is a continuation from the last episode. They are in Vegas still.
377 miles from Provo, Utah.
So I made a note of that. I thought it was very funny how specific, and I thought, why did they do that? Just to emphasize, like, we're not in Utah anymore. I don't know, like, what is the purpose of that? I was curious.
That's what I was thinking. There is one point when Macy walks past something that has pussy in the title of the
Oh yeah,
venue, and she
yes.
says, "We're not in Utah anymore." And I'm like, I mean, I think when you go to Vegas, you could say we're not in anywhere except Vegas anymore for
Well,
sure. But it is always, I do think it's interesting when, having grown up in Utah, when I went to another state where wine was sold in a grocery store, that was a weird sort of like, oh, that's different, like, so obviously there are cultural differences as you go. And then Vegas is probably the most starkly contrasted of them.
yes, yes. Who does this is Jesse's trip, right? It is Jesse's trip,
She
I think.
definitely planned it.
Because I think it's like a very interesting trip to take for a group of people that do not gamble apart from Zach. They don't drink. They're not, some of them are uncomfortable with certain shows. I mean, are you going then for the food and the lights?
No, that actually is fascinating. So I guess I'll go back to kind of what I was saying in the last episode, where the one part that I felt frustrated about on behalf of Jen, who was the one who's like in so much trouble for going to the Chippendales show, is it felt obvious that they were seeking out an event that was going to be at least something, right? That was going to be maybe not on brand or not on, maybe they felt like it was on brand, right? Not on Mormon brand, but like on the Mom Talk empowerment brand. So on the one hand, they're seeking out something that is that. And my
Mhm.
frustration is just that, like, Jesse is obviously all for, like, this shouldn't matter and it's empowerment. And so I'm going to put you in this situation and whatever happens is going to happen. And that's just a little frustrating because they could have anticipated some of Jen's reactions. But as I'm watching this episode, it is really hard to gauge how Jen feels about it without the context of like how her husband feels about it. So maybe she did think it was appropriate for Jen to go. If Jen was like, absolutely not, I'd be extra annoyed because it's like, why are you putting your friend in such an uncomfortable position?
I thought Jen seemed okay with it. What just by like the last episode when she brought it up to Zach sort of playfully. She brought it up the second time to Zach playfully when they got arrived to Vegas and they were all in the Airbnb. But then Zach, was very much no. But I thought she seemed open to it and maybe even hopeful
Hmm.
that he might change his mind. So this is something that I mean, and again, I've not read research on this. I'm curious what you think, just as this is my observation, that sometimes I think if there is this dynamic, like in a relationship where one maybe is like really controlling and the other one it feels a little bit more anxious about some of these interactions or maybe potential consequences, is it a tactic, not an unintentional move to bring it up in front of a group of your friends when
Hmm.
the other person maybe gets to see how other people view this. So versus you're in this bubble, it's a conversation just between the two of you. It's also easy to get kind of maybe like for Jen to kind of lose her stand, like her stance becomes weakened, I guess. I don't know, but then she's with her friends and like maybe we're gonna go to a show and everyone's woo, and Zach's initial response, yeah, fine with that. And some, are you really? No, no. But in introducing it to your friends in a group of people when your spouse is there, I don't know if that was intentional on her part or, but I thought it was interesting.
That is interesting. I don't know how I feel about that as a whole because I do think sometimes people do that, like criticism and feedback that they don't want to give directly to their partner. They will package in a social setting or they'll deliver it when it's safe or whatever. And sometimes, so we could say like that actually could be an effective way. It could have been helpful for Zach to see other people being fine with it. But it can be uncomfortable to put somebody in that position where like I have a problem with this and you're sort of like bringing it up in front of friends. So I imagine he felt a little bit of that because of how he is, because of
Yes,
how he is.
because of how he is. Enough said. Hmm.
One more thing I think I would want to say just like about Vegas in general, Vegas is close to Salt Lake. And actually maybe fact checkers can check. I have heard, but this could be just like Mormon folklore, but I have heard that like Mormons had a hand in founding early Vegas or, early pioneers sort of like went down to Vegas. I don't know how much of that is true, but St. George, which is like an hour away from Vegas, is a huge Mormon hub too. So I'm not sure. All of that being said, that's interesting. Obviously, it doesn't reflect probably Mormonism at this point where Vegas has gone. But I do think that there is an interesting like relationship that members of the church who live in Vegas often have around gambling and what Vegas brings and what they feel there. And
Do
maybe
you
there's
know
a
that?
little of that in Utah being close by.
Yeah. Do you know like what is the attitude there amongst like people in the LDS church in Vegas?
I don't know for sure. One of my best friends is actually originally from Vegas. One of the things that I've gathered is that maybe over the pulpit in church, they might talk and warn about gambling a little more because it's sort of like there and possible to do, which is funny because now there's so much online gambling. I don't think it's like expanded to other congregations. It's always been like pretty focused on Vegas.
Well, and without gambling in Vegas, what is Vegas? You know, I
Well,
mean, like that.
let me tell you.
Oh, okay.
My, so
Okay. All
my My first trip to Vegas, I was 17 and I went with the drama class because we were going to have the Shakespearean Festival was going to be in St. George. And so
right.
my drama teacher planned like a day trip, maybe an overnight trip to Vegas where we saw Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical Starlight Express. And it was a transformative theatrical experience for me.
That is awesome. That's a good story.
So my relationship with Vegas, even when I've done a little bit of gambling, I'm so cheap, it's hard for me to really like bet enough to win enough to make anything. So I've been to Vegas a lot of times and then I moved to LA. So like passing through Vegas was an overnight regular. To me, a good Vegas trip needs a show and then anything else is frosting. If you just go to Vegas to maybe drink, hang out, gamble, it's usually not satisfying. You usually don't win. You usually kind of just like do all the things and then leave empty-handed. So I think having like a show as the center of your experience in Vegas is super important. But
Okay.
that was pre-alcohol. That was pre-anything. We weren't doing any Vegas-y stuff.
I've never been to Vegas.
I think they've tried to make it slightly more family friendly or at least have family friendly offerings,
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
but I'm not sure. I haven't been for a long time.
Maybe one day. It's just not up there on my list. I did live in Biloxi, Mississippi, the Vegas of the South
Oh,
for an
goodness.
internship. Yes. That was the only time I've only gambled once. I did the what's the spinning thing?
Roulette. Yeah.
I did roulette. I won $200. I actually think I'd be pretty good at I can walk away really easily from things
Mm.
like when it comes to money. So like you win 200 bucks, I'm done for the night. I got $200. And then if I just did that a bunch, then I then,
Then you,
but no.
yeah. So this episode picks up right where it left off, which is Dakota and Zach are both mad that their wives are going to Chippendales. Um, although I would say the way that they're expressing their anger is experientially different for Jen than it is for Taylor.
Yes. I wrote in my note the first thing for episode 7, Dakota and Zach are angry. Period. Spiraling. Period.
It's really true though. Like Zach's texts, which started in the last episode and kind of continue in this, are like they're unhinged.
Unhinged. What was fascinating that I thought was and he's completely sober. Like, I mean, as far as we know, like, we don't actually know, maybe he was not, but and not to say that I'm not saying that that's an excuse if you are inebriated and in any way, and I'm not to say that you cannot send these ranting text messages sober, but it was sort of remarkable. Like, I was like, this man, I think, has all his faculties. Like, he is
Right.
not
His
drinking.
lack of inhibition while sober
Yes,
about his relationship.
yes.
Shocking.
Yes. I was like, wow, the extent and intensity of his anger. Yeah. And they are losing it. I mean, it just seemed like both of them in different ways, different ways. Dakota seems like not scary, but desperately sad and freaking out, like anxious. He seems like an anxious hot mess. And Zach feels like he's the person that's gonna like punch a wall.
Yeah, that actually does seem true. Like Dakota, again, I have a soft spot for like I think what Dakota could be as his best self. But
You see that's in Dakota.
I have no soft spot for Zach because I just feel like it's the most toxic masculinity wrapped up on display. And he can't even hide it if he wants to. Like he probably wants to, but he can't.
He probably thinks he's doing a pretty good job hiding it. I don't think she's coming back the next season. Again, I need to look that up. I don't think she is, which would make sense because of the
Because he's got her locked in the basement.
yes, because he has her locked in the basement. And all the women, like when they had that conversation with Jen, which I know we can get to later, but they basically say, we hate your husband and he disgusts us. Like we're disgusted by him. Um, that's a big
That
hard to come back from, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that is right at the very end of the episode, and I want to talk about the
Yes.
efficacy of that approach. But yeah, he really burned some bridges, I think, with mom talk in this episode, and we'll see why.
And viewers.
And
Viewers as well.
yeah, they turned against him.
Mhm.
So the show opens with obviously Jen and Taylor kind of commiserating over their shared relationship challenges. We do see the Chippendales show. Demi kind of brings up that this is a reflection of misogyny in the LDS Church, which
Which
I think
part?
is she's just kind of just talking about Zach in general.
Oh,
She's
okay.
just
Okay.
they're just sort of commenting on those reactions. And I think Jesse says that at some point, and I think Macy sort of says like I'm not sure. So I guess my impression of this, what like this type of behavior exists across cultures in all kinds of situations.
Yeah.
And I think it's also okay to like reflect on like, okay, well, what parts of my culture contribute or support that compared to what challenges it. And I would say that in my sort of like very kindness reading of this, LDS church culture probably doesn't do enough to challenge this kind of behavior. I don't know that it creates it, but it probably sustains it more than other sort of ideologies might. So
Mhm.
I can appreciate what they're saying. They're just sort of like, oh, the misogyny in LDS culture is super high. I think it allows for it,
Yes.
for sure. And some people might feel like it creates it.
Like there's enough to maybe that someone could justify their behavior in a way that says it's aligned with maybe some of the values, but it's more extremist. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like I think one of the things they're saying is like who's in charge is the priesthood holder, and only men can hold the priesthood. And so while that looks very different in different families and the way people react and respond to that, if you have a family where the guy wants to take on that role, he can sort of point to scripture and be like, see, like I should, or something like that. That makes sense to me. Again, we're at the show. They're having the time of their life. It's very like, sexual. Again, it goes back to that thing where like they could have gone to Branson, Missouri and watched like the Osmonds perform, right? Like that would have been on brand for LDS outing. So Vegas clearly is meant to be like we're going out of our cultural norm comfort zone to do this thing that's, in sex sells and like all of those things. So I appreciate that, but it is funny. I do feel a certain kind of way where Jesse's like watching that man grind up on Layla who's young and single just made my night and I'm like
Mhm.
okay.
I note, pause, unrelated, but related to what you said about the Osmonds. Did you know that the nephew of Donnie and Marie Jared Osmond is on the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. He's dating one of the friends of, he's a good looking man. Like
Huh.
he is really good looking, but he knows it and he's kind of portrayed on the show as a guy who's like a jerk. Like, I mean, that's how
Interesting.
he reads when you watch it because he's dating a friend of, and she's like, "We're in love," and he's like, "This is my friend." And and then they're like on and off, and he's like maybe talking to other women, but she loves him. And anyway, I don't think we've talked about that, so I wanted to just share that with you. We can
Well,
go back.
that's fascinating. I don't have a ton to say about the Osmonds, but for those who don't know, the Osmond, Donnie and Marie were siblings who were pretty famous for a television show. I don't know. They had a show. Maybe it was the Donnie Marie show. So they're
Yeah, I think
pretty famous for Mormon entertainers. What's really funny about that is there was a time as a young teenager that I went into the temple to do the baptisms that are done in the temple, and the older leaders were like, oh, whatever. One of the Osmonds, Merrill Osmond, was in the font doing baptisms. And so there was a little bit of like, there's a celebrity doing that. It was like kind of a surreal experience. At the time, I didn't know the Osmonds. And then the final thing I will say is Marie Osmond has a hairdresser that she has been with for years and loves, and it is my mother's hairdresser. My
oh my
mother
gosh,
predates Marie Osmond for getting her hair done by the same person.
your mom's claim to fame. I love it.
That's right. So when I was on my LDS mission, my mom sent me an autographed picture of Marie Osmond, which she was able to get through her hairdresser.
That is so funny. It feels very like small town like, right?
Yeah.
Like we share our hairstylist, this really famous person, and like me, or like someone related to a famous person. It's very, yeah. Well, I think so. Living in Indianapolis, I didn't always live here, but my family lived here. I went to preschool here, and then but most of my life I was in Florida. But when we went to preschool, we went to the church that who is the famous guy at communications, Ball State?
David Letterman?
Yes, his mother went to that church. So that was
Oh,
like my parents' claim to fame.
interesting.
And
Yeah,
then
it's always
yeah, it's always something. Yeah. Anyway,
always super interesting. Yeah. Yeah, we used to walk through the David Letterman building from our
nice.
stats class.
Was that halfway? That was, I think, to some places. Anyway, it was warm in there and it connected to different
It
buildings.
was there was a sky bridge, and every once in a while I would pass Drake from the
Ah,
Chinese food place.
great, great. I wonder what he's doing right now.
It's probably just
Not be
being
Drake.
hot and tattooed somewhere.
Yes. Oh, he was.
So Jen and Taylor leave the event before the oiling up and the dancing and the grinding. They leave the event and go back to the house or whatever where they're staying, and they're just like feeling miserable because Jen's getting texts that are like, "I'm done. It's over. I
You're a
can't
terrible
trust
mother.
you. You're a terrible mother. You're a terrible person. You have no morals. You have no values." He's madly texting this, we find out later, while he's gambling, which I just totally love.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
recognize that like committing adultery is different from gambling, but that is not what she did. That's how he's reacting.
Yes. And even if she did commit adultery, those responses are not, those texts are not appropriate. You're a terrible mother. Like, no, we don't, no.
Yeah.
Um,
Adultery has nothing to do with motherhood.
that is completely
Why are you
unrelated.
changing the topic?
Let's stay focused here. Yes, because I think at one point she's crying and she says, I hate when he questions my character. And I was like, that's really sad that like you feel like that from about your spouse, your partner, that like so when she says that, I hate when he questions my character, implies that's happened more than once.
Right,
Because
that that's his
otherwise it's like,
response.
yeah, can you believe he's questioning who I am? No, I hate when he does this. Like he does it.
Mhm.
So
So we get a cut to Dakota. My boy Dakota is on the phone looking cold for Vegas. This must have been dead of winter because he's got a hoodie up. And and he says what you said last time, which is like the thing he doesn't like is picturing this dancer grinding up on his not wife, but his partner while she's 36 weeks pregnant with my kid. Like that's what he doesn't like. And I'm like, what? Like because
what?
like what does that do? Like, what?
I know he's not even well, and it's interesting because I like with Zach, I think is there an actual concern? Like, is Zach really worried that she is going to have an affair, have sex, I don't know, make out, anything? Do you think that's going to happen, or what is the threat there, I guess? Because I feel like if roles were reversed, there could be this feeling where like maybe a woman is concerned that her husband is going to cross the line and do something inappropriate. So there might be like jealousy or like concern, like don't do X, Y, and Z. But like in these roles, I was sort of curious, like, do you think Jen is going to do something? But then you could see Dakota in what he says. I don't think he's worried about Taylor having sex with any of them or making out. But he's worried about some hot young man
Well,
grinding
it's
up
true.
on him,
I
pregnant.
remember a client that I had really early on was a guy, and I don't remember the details, but it was something like his girlfriend or wife or whatever, like watched his gaze. And so if he looked at somebody, she was so upset. And so I don't think it's rational. I would love to unpack that. Like what is the fear there? Is it like that you don't want him to feel arousal from other people because that would lead to, or that's I don't know. I do think people have really fragile like attachment things that maybe aren't always rational. Because I
Mhm.
think Dakota, if I were sort of like saying that to him, where I was just like, why, what's the problem? His first reaction would probably be like, it's obvious. Why are you being obtuse, right? Like, I think there's just like a feeling involved where I'm like, it's so wrong, but I'm not, I don't know how much he's thinking through it beyond that to say what he's worried about.
I mean, I think so. I've had someone like in way past where similar, same situation, but I was speaking to the woman,
Mm,
and it wasn't that if he looked at someone else, it wasn't that that person was a threat to the relationship. It's that that individual didn't feel like he was attracted to her. And that's
mhm,
it's like coming from a place of I'm not feeling good enough. I don't feel like you feel like I'm good enough for this relationship, or I don't feel like you are fully in it. And then these are signs that support that feeling. You checking out someone else, see, you're not interested in me. And I think that's like where it stems from with
mm,
Dakota. He wants to get married. She doesn't want to get married right now for like very valid reasons. They argue all the time. Like they're both like constantly crying, and so it's just, but she's pregnant. He wants a family. And so I think any maybe like concern of even just like potential attraction to someone is just not an actual threat in that moment, but
mm.
a reminder of like, she's probably not going to stay with me.
The overall. I mean, that's fascinating to think of because for Dakota, he's really clear, right, that that's his concern. He wants her to be with him and everything. Zach probably would never say that because I actually think I probably agree with Demi's diagnosis of narcissism for Zach. So again, we don't know that much about the other men because they're like just better and less remarkable for the purposes of this show. But it is true. I mean, I think if you're looking at Dakota, I don't know what all he has going for him, but maybe he's sort of like Taylor is out of my league, right? He kind of got hooked up with this sort of celebrity. And so even at 36 weeks pregnant, like maybe he is sort of like, I could easily be replaced by pretty much anybody. And
Yeah.
maybe Zach feels the same way because she's supporting him through school and he's begging her for gambling money. So, like, maybe on some level, they're like, they could do better. And so maybe that's what things, I don't know.
Yeah,
For
that's a good
everybody else's husbands, I don't know. It is very strange to me. It's unrealistic to think that love means that you don't feel attraction or other forms of beauty. Like if you loved me, you would lose the ability to appreciate the human body on another person is very strange and yet common.
Yeah. I wondered though, so like in terms of like a gendered look at some of this, it seems to be, and this is I'm a woman, obviously, so there's a bias there, but and this is more observational than anything, but what feels to be a little bit more threatening to the relationship? Is it like the woman going like, woo, like look at that, like cute, like okay, Real Housewives. You see these women in their 40s, maybe even 50s, like they see like 30-year-old good-looking man and they're like flirtatious. That doesn't feel super threatening. That doesn't feel necessarily creepy. Sometimes it can be. I think there's a double standard. But like with if you do like a 50-year-old man, it feels a little bit more like threatening. Like he might act on that. And I don't
Yeah.
know if that's just I feel like that can exist, that feeling of there's a difference between, and there might not be, because, or there might sometimes be a difference, but attraction is normal. It is normal to be attracted to other people, and it is okay to acknowledge that's a good looking person. So it doesn't have to be threatening.
Yeah. So Dakota gets on the phone with Brett, and I don't know who Brett is. Is Brett Demi's husband? Is Brett
Brett, I
Macy's?
think, is Jesse's husband,
Jesse. Okay.
and who planned the trip.
So, Brett was being supportive. Dakota, I know early on I was like, I don't want to speak badly of anyone. And as much as I do like Dakota, he's on the phone and he's just sort of like, I'm one of those people who goes to worst case scenarios. And so I worry. And I mean, and that's good to know about yourself. But like the next step of that is, so I need to work on that, not she needs to work on that because I'm that type of person. And I don't know if Dakota's there. I think there's a lot of these women need to behave in a way that makes up for my insecurities, and that's very frustrating.
One of the things that I wrote down that I was curious about, do we know how long he's been sober? Do you know?
I don't remember. I feel like in the first episode, maybe he gave like a newly-ish, but that could be a year, that could be months. I'm not sure. So by this point, it could be a year, assuming he's consecutively sober since the beginning of like the show.
Well, and he's young. He's in his late 20s, right? I
I would
think.
assume so. He's got to be, yeah.
But one of the things I was curious about, like, how much do we think that maybe some of his emotional, like, dysregulation is a result of maybe like the early sobriety or not? Like, you think about like
Hmm.
any like substance use disorder or alcohol use disorder, there's a tendency that the reason why this happens is because someone is unable to use other coping skills. It can be like a way to numb, a way to maybe like not feel less anxious in certain situations, or like I
Hmm.
feel sad, and whatever it might be. And so part of me is like, maybe he's like not really learned skills to help regulate, and that could be a factor like related to
I thought
what.
of that. He's on the phone and I was feeling, I was like, I would imagine that certain people who have a history of drug use would think in that moment, like, this is when I want slash need it, right? Like that is my coping.
Mhm.
Um, what I can appreciate about Dakota, I think, in all of this is that he is saying how he's feeling, right?
Mhm.
So I feel like, and not that we have to keep comparing because the experiences are slightly different, but like I don't see Zach sort of being like, I just get real nervous. I'm kind of insecure, like whatever.
Agreed.
Zach
Yeah.
just kind of says nothing and pretends that like he's fine, everything's fine, like whatever. Dakota's being vulnerable, even though his behaviors are, I have comments, but
That is true.
he's being
Yes.
he's
I
being vulnerable.
He's acknowledging at least the anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
He's
and
just not
Zach,
taking accountability yet.
he's not taking accountability, but at least he's sort of partially naming the problem, which is not happening with Zach at all. So
Yeah.
Zach,
So
so yeah, Demi says that he is a narcissist. And she goes to Jen, he's judging you on something you didn't even do.
it's true. I mean, it's true. Like he's reacting as if she did the thing. This scene was interesting because they all come back, and again, I felt the certain kind of way. Not that they were wrong, but the women all come back and they're wooing, which is fun. But I'm also sort of like, okay, so now you know that these friends who you tried to drag into this thing couldn't stay and left, and so to walk in like woo woo, I had a little bit of a reaction, just the party train vibe when it's just like check in with them. Jen's like dead inside and just trying to be on TV the best she can in that moment. Taylor's exhausted, I assume, right? She's just like nothing's phasing her because she's very busy concentrating on her discomfort probably. But it takes a while before they're like, hey, what's wrong? But I'm imagining in this moment that Jen is pissed off at them for them bringing in that energy. I'm not sure that's true because then when they kind of respond to what she's saying, what Zach is saying, or whatever, it feels mixed support. This will be my theme throughout this episode is like I'm just really curious how people reacted to the friends' reactions because I found it simultaneously supportive and challenging in a way that I wasn't sure how it was landing with Jen, but I was feeling like both of those vibes.
So Demi shares because Jen leaves that night, but not till like 2 a.m.
2 a.m. Yeah, she has to take. Yeah, that's right. They come home woo woo, but then yeah, overnight, Jen's like gone in the morning. Right.
She leaves about the time that he's done gambling, 2 a.m. apparently, which they point out. And
Which
no, what?
well, so they learn that because Taylor. This is actually my favorite. This to me is a good example of Taylor being Taylor. It's also a good comparison to Jen and Taylor, who have similar but different situations right here. But Jen gets a phone call from Dakota.
Taylor, yes.
She is so cold to him, but I'm not saying that she shouldn't be right. Like she
No, I
is just
agree. I
like
love the way she honestly, I really liked how she handled that conversation.
I do too. And so Dakota's trying to be cool. He does a much better job at trying to be cool than Zach does. But he's just like, yeah, he was gambling till 1:30 or 2 and then like whatever. And she's like, oh, really? And so Dakota doing bro code is like, oh, was I not supposed to say that or whatever? Like I didn't cover for Zach gambling till 2 a.m. while being the world's biggest douchebag.
No.
But then he's like, "Oh, so you met the dancers? Oh, I didn't know that." And Taylor, like, she talks to him. She doesn't, it's not super abrupt, but she kind of hangs up on him because she's just like, "Okay, more of the same stuff. I'm just done entertaining it." And I wasn't mad about it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I thought she handled it really great. Yeah, oh, I didn't know you went back there with the guys. Yeah. Well, why didn't you tell me or why didn't you tell me that? Well, I'm telling you that now. But why
Yeah.
didn't you tell me last night? It doesn't matter. I'm telling you about it right now.
So what's the
And
problem?
yeah, what's the problem? I
When
thought
would I
like,
have told you? Yeah, Dakota's sort
yeah,
of like, you should have checked in immediately when you already knew who I was reacting, and you're on this girl's trip, and whatever, like ridiculous.
yes, yeah, yeah. She says something like, "When would I have had time last night to tell you?" What I thought was kind of funny is that she started off the conversation with Dakota almost like complaining about Zach's behavior, like almost like trying to join, like trying to get Dakota to join with her. Like, did you hear how problematic this was? Yeah, and he's like, oh, and he seemed to be joining her in that, like a little bit, like it was like the early signs. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, he was like, he was pretty upset. Like he was out till like 2 a.m. And she's like, yeah, well, and then then it's like he forgot that. He's like, I'm no longer joining in this conversation with you against Zach. Like, I am upset with you. But yeah, I thought,
Dakota should be counting his blessings. He's so lucky that Zach is doing what he's doing because it makes him not the worst one.
well, they're not focusing on him as much. Like they do a little bit, but everyone was like, it was Dakota at first because they came in hot, like they're like arguing and crying and everything, and then it just
Mm-hmm.
everything shifted, whoop, right to Zach and Jen.
Yeah.
Understand because he says so. According to Demi, who
Mm.
shares with the group after Jen left, what Zach said to Jen, and I quote, "I'm fucking done with you. I don't love you. You are disgusting." I cannot. I mean, that is, I mean, never okay to say to anyone ever, but she also didn't do anything. She also didn't do anything. And it's wild to have your partner say, you're disgusting. Like that is
Well, Jesse says something that I really agree with to an extent, or at least should be aware of, which is she's like, he can't take that back. Like, even if they get to a good place, that's going to be in the back of her head. And Jesse's sort of like forever, kind of thing. But it is true. Like, there are things you should just never ever say unless you're like planning to sign divorce papers
yeah,
because
unless you are done.
yeah. And it is amazing because like what I think crosses that line might be slightly different than what somebody else or whatever, but the number of people who say things like this and think that it's okay to say something like this because they're mad, but I didn't really mean it. I mean, I would be in a relationship with that person for literally 2 seconds. And so it's interesting how for Jen maybe it feels it sounds like this isn't normal for her, but like certain people are normal, like, oh, when he gets mad. we both say these things that are just so over the top, and I'm like, I would be done. It would be over for me.
I agree completely. I do want to say real quick, going back to the phone call with Dakota, I just made a note because I thought it was really funny when she was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm alone at a go-kart place."
He knows how to cope.
He knows how to cope.
He knows how
I
to
love
cope in
it.
Vegas.
I thought it was great. Sorry, that yes, little
Wholesome boy trip.
one of the things they say, so going back to Demia's talking about the sharing what Jen shared with her, they're trying to get in touch with Jen. Jen's not really being super responsive. So the women make a comment, something along the lines of, so this is sort of going back to what you were saying, like this, the reaction of the women, the support, the challenging, like, how do we feel about that? So they said, I swear, if like Jen comes back and says, "It's fine, everyone. He respects me now." Like, I am going to be mad. And they all are nodding in agreement. Like, they're all like, yeah, yeah, that will be super annoying if she just like tidies everything up and almost like expects everyone else to just forget it as well.
Yeah. Which I don't know if she's done that, but I think that's a valid thing because I do think that's what people do in certain relationships. And again, I can't give the full assessment or whatever, but like if this is a toxic slash abusive relationship, even if it's emotionally abusive or whatever, I think that's what Macy is seeing and responding to. That's what Jesse is seeing and responding to, is they think it is abusive, it is toxic, it's going to go there, that kind of thing. Because she even brings up, she's like, it's always the charmers like Ted Bundy. Not that it's that, but she like, she sort of basically says this personality trait is problematic.
Yep.
Um,
Mhm.
and I think that's what can be very frustrating for the friends of somebody who's in an abusive relationship is that response of defending the abuser that they're anticipating. So I thought that was very poignant. And that's why therapy with somebody who is in an abusive relationship can be challenging because whatever's keeping them there can kind of create resistance around somebody who's trying to help in a certain way or trying to get them out of a relationship or trying to get them to examine it more critically.
And I think what's challenging with a like doing therapy, couples therapy with a covert narcissist, and again, we are not diagnosing anyone. We are not this is just us generally speaking. Like Zach has, it seems like some traits, but we are not, we don't know anything about, right? We've never met him. But I I think sometimes couples counseling can be really problematic for someone in that's maybe like very charming, maybe like more covert narcissism, because both parties have to feel validated. And if you are someone who is constantly in like being gaslit, it and then you see the therapist sort of validating your partner who is the problematic one, the one doing the emotional abuse, it can
Mhm.
get very confusing. It can be really discouraging. Also, someone can be, it can be very, if someone is charming, they can kind of twist the narrative enough to where it's maybe hard for a therapist to observe some of those, at least at first. I feel like a good therapist could maybe pick it out, but then how you, what I've observed, I don't do couples work, but what I've observed sometimes in these, in similar dynamics is that as soon as the therapist says something that person with more narcissistic tendencies does not like, we're done with therapy. That person's wrong. They're an idiot. They don't know what they're talking about. We're done. I'm out and it's over.
Right. So you're kind of trying to balance like how do you keep them in therapy while doing therapeutic things? Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't do couples. So,
There's a little interlude. We've got Whitney still on the show. She's still contractually, I'm sure, obligated to appear in a certain number of episodes or whatever. I do find it funny because Connor comes in, sans mustache, and is like, "You're not going to believe the gossip that the boys are spreading around right now." No, but he just sort of comes in and he's like, "I know you're trying to steer clear of the drama, but do you want to hear it?" She's like, "I mean, yeah." So
yep.
he says all this that goes on, and he kind of cuts to the chase, at least on the part they show in the episode, which is like Zach is doing this, he's saying these things which are really over the top and horrible. What do you think? And Whitney
What do
does
you
the most
say?
Whitney thing, which is like, I mean, I don't care, she's not a good friend. It's like, however you feel about Jen, that is not related to how Zach is responding, and she just makes it so quick about her, it's hilarious.
Yes, I thought so. I wrote, oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, so Connor says to Whitney, Zach told Jen that she's a terrible mother and he wants a divorce and she has like no values. And Whitney's like, I mean, yeah, I can kind of see that because she's not a good friend. I'm like
Because
that, yeah,
when I unfollowed her and stopped talking, she hasn't reached out to me.
she never reached out. Yeah, she doesn't have values. She's not a good wife. And what's interesting is Connor, the way he sets up the story is very much like he's Team Jen. Like he's like, listen to how problematic this is.
Right.
When he's like, I mean, I'm on Zach's side here. I'm gonna,
Right. I know. He's like Team Gen, Team Women, Team the
yeah.
right thing or whatever. And it is funny. Again, I know this could be edited, but like his face when Whitney responds in that way seems disappointed. Seems a bit like, oh, all right. Like, I guess you're going to go this way. I don't know.
I thought so too. One of the things I think is really funny about every shot that they do with Whitney and Connor is like they're really trying to go for this like homestead vibe. So like they're
She's
like, we're
making
gonna go on
cookies.
a farm. They're like baking things. She's like building a chair during this conversation.
That's what she is for some reason.
I was like, we're really going for something here. What consistency is key. We're doing it.
And you know the producers weren't like, "Hey, we got to film you at this time." And she's like, "Oh gosh, I'm building a chair at that time, but I guess that's fine." Like she's finding stuff to do when the cameras are on.
Yes, the kids. She's like doing crafts with the kids in every scene, which I, love that. But like crafts and like I'm just like building my own furniture. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I just thought that was funny. But
It is funny. And so Connor, I love he kind of shifts gears where and again, I don't know what he thinks or whatever. I just dislike Whitney, but he's like, I think what you did is really brave. He's like, oh, okay, we're gonna go with this. I think what you did is brave. The easy thing would have been to go to the just to go to Vegas, but you did the hard thing, which was holding your boundaries or whatever. And Whitney's just like, I just don't even want to be around those women or whatever. I mean, it's just pretty funny. But Connor was being a good partner there, giving her
yeah,
props for what she thinks she's doing.
like he's trying to see where's the wind blowing this time in the conversation. I'm going that direction.
So they talk about Zach a lot in the
Mhm.
hot tub. There's a little hot tub scene where they get to do that, but they ultimately are like, he's so controlling. This is when Jesse's like, I think this is LDS church stuff. She hasn't confided in us, and all of those pieces.
Mhm.
And then Dakota comes over to
Yes,
talk to
Dakota comes
Taylor.
over, wants to apologize to Taylor. Macy and Michaela, I think, are outside trying to eavesdrop, and one of their phones goes off, which is so real.
Macy's really struggling, and I can see why. Like, a lot of times when you're watching a television show, like a sitcom especially, you're like, all of this could have been avoided if you had just done the thing. And I think when they get storytelling right, it's like, oh yeah, that would be difficult, like whatever. I do think that the situation is set up where such where Macy's like, I have information. I really need to tell Taylor. The timing seems important. The setting seems important. And then as the weekend goes on, she's like, I should have told her already. I don't know what to do. And so, like, she's going through a whole thing where she knows she has to break this news to Taylor.
Yes, and she says something like, "I don't want Taylor to go into labor and have a baby in the Airbnb. I don't want to stress her out." And I feel like, it's like don't shoot the messenger. Like it's a really
Yeah.
tough position to be in where you want to share this, but how is that person going to react? And
Yeah, they
um,
might turn on you.
I've seen it before
Yeah,
on many
seen it
reality shows.
before.
Yeah. Mhm.
So this is the moment though where I think Taylor has been saying this, but she says it the most overtly where it really sank in for me, where she says, I am so pregnant, so exhausted. Can I just have the baby? And Dakota, despite all of the cuteness that I find in him, he will not let up on trying to marry her right now. And it is so frustrating to watch because
I'm
he
telling
is
you.
sabotaging the relationship constantly. He is
Yeah.
doing everything he can to destroy the relationship that he wants so bad. It's very frustrating to watch. And poor
Yes.
Taylor has to be like pregnant and deal with his feelings.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to handle. One of the things Taylor says, so the women they go out to dinner and
Jen's still missing. She's at large.
Jen is Jen is still missing. Taylor says, so they start talking a little bit about both Taylor and Dakota and Jen and Zach. Jen, as you said, not there. But Taylor says that she doesn't want to turn into Jen in 5 years, which I thought was,
Mm.
I mean, that's a, yeah, if you're
Valid fear.
that, you're like, okay,
Yeah.
his behavior is in Zach's behavior yet, like could it be, would that, but it's problematic, it's not good, but like at least he's not calling her like disgusting and all of the things that Zach was. But is it going to turn, if I just maintain this, is it going to keep getting worse? Is it going to turn into that? Am I going to be stuck again in a marriage that,
Right. What kind of security does the Zach feel in the relationship because they're married with two children
yes.
to say whatever he feels like? And again, I don't, yeah, like what you're saying, I'm not sure Dakota would go there. It makes so much sense for Taylor to be like, get your stuff together before I marry you. Like, if you can't get your stuff together before we get married, I have no faith that you're going to get it together after we get married.
Nope, no.
Zach apparently texts like things about everyone else's
You never said
marriage.
that again, and I wanted to bring that up. Yeah. Hmm.
I mean, it's really a great moment in terms of like putting a nail in a coffin. But he's like, Jesse cheated on her husband, which Jesse denies. Demi's married to a 50-year-old as if that's bad. The other one's single. Can you imagine? Like, just kind of like,
Layla's single.
like, so give me a break. Like, it's just interesting how he goes on the attack about those, which has often been his thing, right? This is the abuser's handbook, is like, I need to separate them from their friends. I need to devalue the friends' contributions. I need, like, there's a power struggle in who she's going to listen to. And I think they both, the group of friends and Zach, I think they both feel this and show this in two different ways, which is like, while Jen's missing, they're all like, we don't know what version of Jen is going to come back. Like, we want to really express these things and have her see them, but then he's got her ear over here. And then when he's with the girls, Zach's like, "Oh my gosh, what are they telling her?" Like,
Mhm. Yeah.
the autonomy of Jen is not really like showing up in this episode. It is, but
No, yeah. Jen does meet up with them.
yeah, she eventually comes, and it is funny because, well, they get her on the phone first, which I mean, that's the other thing. She's like late for this lunch, and I'm just telling you, if I'm on a television show and there's dinner plans, I'm going to be there on time. So, like, whatever's going on, the fact that Zach or the relationship isn't respecting some sort of like commitments. I realize a relationship is like more important than a TV show, but like, you have a commitment here. Like, you're not at dinner, so that
Do
tells
your
me
job.
something. Yeah, do your job. So
Show up.
Jen shows up and they're all worried about how she'll do. And I think she showed a little bit of what they said, which is kind of like, she knows she was on TV, but she's still coming in like, oh, things are so good. Like,
She
that
says,
talk was so necessary.
she was like, we are really good. We are really good now. Things are good.
And he
Um,
apologized apparently, so maybe that's what she's thinking, is like, he did privately take accountability and apologize, supposedly.
Layla said something that I thought was really insightful. Which we sort of touched on earlier moments ago. Layla says, you wouldn't get over it that fast unless it's a normal thing. And I was like, good point.
Ooh, that's, yeah, fascinating. Like, her ability to bounce back from vitriolic insults.
Yes.
Oh.
Because otherwise, I think if that were the first time, it's shocking. Like, because I just never thought, and then it takes maybe a little bit. And then if you think about that abuse cycle, there often is like their honeymoon. I'm so sorry. I won't ever do that again. You're right, blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
And maybe there was like a slight moment where he was apologetic. We didn't see any of that, which I also find interesting because if that had happened, I would assume that the cameras would have caught it, or sometimes they, and again, this is going off of like podcasts that I listen to with producers, because I am not one, I know nothing. But I think sometimes they will have conversations that have occurred, but they want to continue the storyline. They might have, can you please like have that conversation over again? And even though they've had it, they try to like, well, maybe like recreate it or try to like talk about it again so that they can have it on camera. You see Dakota, I mean, we follow a lot of these private conversations that Taylor and Dakota have with each other. We're not seeing any of that. And so I don't know if that was something that Zach just nixed. I don't want this on camera. Or if they asked, like, can you guys like talk about, can you like show us like what that conversation was like? Nope. not doing it. But they don't show any of that, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, somebody really talked about like tired of the men ruining these trips, they're big babies. And I think in that moment I was like, yeah, they really, really are. They also make the comment, and don't spend too much time on it, but they're like, man, there's not a lot of drama when Whitney's not here. So they're kind of pointing that out. And Macy does her thing where she's like, she's impulsive. I've never seen her this impulsive. She's hot and cold. I hope she's okay. Macy does such a good job of like validating what everybody else is saying that's true while not turning on Whitney. I don't know if Whitney feels that way. It might feel too harsh to say like she's being impulsive, but I feel like Macy's being so careful to be fair. And then when Jen shows up, she's like, has there been a lot of drama? And to me, gave this very like genuine looking response where she's like, no, there hasn't. And she even says, when you and Whitney aren't here, which I think
Yes.
she said it very jokingly. And I think Whitney obviously brings much more drama, but like kind of acknowledging like there are group dynamics that work differently when Whitney's not here.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. They one of the things that Jen says, which we've touched on, I think, in earlier episodes, that's something that Taylor has said, uh, and Dakota has said about himself. Jen says, "No one has ever loved me more than Zach." And Demi goes, "You got married when you were 20, Jen."
Yeah, just wait till you feel what other kinds of love exist out there.
Yes. But so when all of the women, it's like they're having their own like mini, probably like spontaneous intervention. I don't know that they went in necessarily thinking like, we all need to talk to her. But when they saw like she was like, we're good, they were all like, we need to talk about what just happened, what we witnessed. Then they point out he insulted all of us. We don't want any, that's when Jesse said, I don't want anything to do with him ever again. If I saw him, I would tell him off, essentially. And I like that she said, and everyone else here thinks that. So back me up, because she was like, you're not going to pin it on me. Like Jesse doesn't like Zach. We all felt the same way. And then some of them, I think Macy might have, but some of them clarify, like, it's because we're so passionate. We care about you, Jen. We're mad. Demi says something like, we're like this right now because we're passionate about you. We care about you. We're upset with Zach. And watching Jen's face to me was really interesting the whole time. You can like see just all different emotions coming up that she's also trying, like she's like trying to process some of what they're sharing. I'm also probably, I would be confident to say like maybe something that also entered her mind was, great, this is all going to be on camera. Like, what does that mean for me? Like, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're all having this conversation. It's on a TV show. Like, I mean, I think all of that probably had to be going through her mind.
I agree. I was really feeling a lot of empathy for Jen in that moment because all of those factors would make it so hard to like just be present and do what you got to do. But she did. She showed up for her job, which was to have this conversation. And I hear her say they're validating thoughts I've had and feelings. So I was really going back and forth. Like when they really kind of like jumped on that and laid into her a little bit, I was worried that it wouldn't be effective. Like I said in the beginning of the episode, like my concern is, does she stop sharing things with you because of the way that you react? And I hope not, or whatever. And I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell because in that moment, Jen might have needed them to be compassionate and forgiving and they weren't. And so that's hard on the relationship. But what they were saying, I feel like was true. But what
Mhm.
Jesse said, like he dragged us into it, that made it so easy, right? Is sort of
Yes.
like, I can support you in a lot of ways. He said this about me. So I don't
Yeah.
have to like
Yeah.
that's between me and him now. And I think that's super valid.
Yes.
He made a real misstep there by denigrating her friends.
Did you listen to the podcast Dirty John?
I feel
No.
like I did. I know it was a wondery one, right?
Yes. Yes. And they did a show about it too.
Hmm.
And but it's about a man with like narcissistic personality disorder amongst maybe other things, like, but he pretended to be a doctor and he was not. He got into a relationship with the woman who's alive and does a lot of interviews and talks about like domestic violence. He yeah, he lied about being a doctor. I think she was a very like wealthy, well-known interior designer maybe, or architect, like something like that, I believe, living in California, and she had two daughters. Anyway, he was very violent. He got to the point where he attacked one of her daughters who killed him. And like,
Oh,
and I mean, it's a
wow.
wild story. But so one of the things that she, like the interior designer, the woman who was in the relationship with John, said was she had a lot of maybe the people around her were heavily criticizing him, and she was not ready to like move on from the relationship. So it ended up being very isolating. Like she then
Hmm.
just didn't talk to people as much because she knew what they would say. They would say, get out of it. They'd say, like, he's a problem.
Yeah.
What do you like? I'm curious what you think about. I mean, that's sort of like what we're talking about. Like, how much do you push and share your thoughts without, you know, isolating your friend either? And I don't know.
I really don't know. I mean, I think I would look to Macy here, who I think does the best job of balancing a lot of like, I care about you and I can join with you, but this is about you.
Yeah.
Whereas Jesse's approach and Demi's approach, while I agree with everything they're saying, I don't know if it's as effective as that. And it really does suck. Like I have had a friend who is in an abusive relationship, or at least one with signs, and it's just so frustrating to kind of basically be like, I really only have one response, which is get out of it. And if that's not the response, it's very frustrating to hear about those things. But I guess that would be the like if you had a friend who was in an abusive relationship and you were asking me what they should do, I would talk about what you're talking about, which is you have to think about the outcome you want. And that's difficult too because you might have somebody who's in an abusive relationship, their friends don't say enough, and then all this goes down and their friend is like, "Oh, I knew it and I was worried." And you might have somebody who's like, "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say this to me?" I think this is where Macy is feeling this too. She's like, I actually have information I need to tell you, and you could blame me if I don't share it to you, or you could be upset if I do. I think it
Yeah.
puts her in a difficult position. And Macy's emotional intelligence is off the charts as far as I'm concerned.
We
So,
love her.
yeah,
Huge fan.
yeah.
Love her. Yeah, I think like providing a balance of just like what Macy's did and what you described, like of support of, I love you no matter what. Like I'm here for you. Also, you don't deserve that. This is not kind treatment. No one should be treating anyone this way, much less your spouse. Like, I think you can share that in a really like loving and supportive way, sharing your concerns, but then also saying like, I'm here for you too. Like, because at the end of the day, it's up to Jen to decide what she does. And if
Mhm.
she comes to a place where she's ready to leave, like then that's what will happen. But if she's not there yet, then like yelling at her is not going to get her there. So
Yeah,
they were yelling. They were like, I understand the passion for sure.
sure.
I would feel all of that. And then
Yeah,
some. Yeah.
yeah.
Wait, real quick. So one part, because I was trying to rewatch it sort of quickly. Macy does tell Taylor about the message in this episode,
They
right?
do finally, yeah.
But what's Taylor's reaction? Because then they kind of it just like quickly moves on to the dinner with Jen, or like Jen comes.
I think so. I think we'll probably get the bulk of the reaction in the end, but this is another moment where Taylor's sort of emotional intelligence is growing, and you can see that. I don't know if it's emotional intelligence, but they sit down, and Taylor's immediately like, "What's wrong with your faces?" And they both try to, you know, kind of gaslight her at first, where they're like, "What? Nothing." It's not quite
Fine.
gaslighting, but she picked up so quickly on the fact that they had something difficult to say to her and was just like, "Well, what is it? You're being weird." And I just have to appreciate Taylor's bluntness. And part of it might be that she's pregnant and has no more F's to give or like whatever it is, but it's like super refreshing every time Taylor sort of like speaks, the more pregnant she gets, because she's just like, your faces
Direct.
are being weird. Tell me what you're going to tell me. And I just love it. So they
Yes.
do tell her, I got this, don't know what it means or whatever. And she kind of has a reaction where she's like, if this is true, it's over. So she kind of reiterates what she's said before. And the only part that sucks, I think, is like, this is the one thing she's upset about. And this might just not be new information. It might be like more of the information she's already had right as
Mhm.
she's about to give birth. But I don't think that means Macy shouldn't have shared it, right? Like it just is what it is.
Yeah. Hmm. I agree.
So then, yeah, they have the decision with Jen, and I have to say, I have like actively tried to not care about this show outside of the show, but I had to do a Google search of like, are they still together? Because like, it's always like weird for me when I'm rooting for a divorce, right? Like I'm like, well, they shouldn't be, what I mean? There's children involved, and I'm still like, you'd be better off. So I looked it up. It looks like they're not divorced; they're together. Um, And I found that disappointing.
Yes. Yes. I find that also disappointing. I think that to come back from that behavior, it takes so much work from the person who speaks like that, who is dysregulated to that degree, acting like that. I mean, that is emotional and like verbal abuse, right? Like
It
that
is.
that's what I would say to someone. And I don't think it just goes away and it's better. And we're done. We're not doing that anymore.
I don't know, maybe you could go into some childhood trauma or whatever, but like it's very hard to be compassionate about that behavior. And I
Yeah.
will say, when I did a quick search of Zach Affleck, immediate, who knows, anonymous Reddit posts, things like that came up. But somebody was like, I knew Zach in high school and he is getting karma. And I had to
Really?
laugh. Yeah. So,
You sack in high school. He's getting karma.
yeah. According to one anonymous Reddit user, this is par for the course for Zach.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, maybe people don't think that also, like, but if you know your wife is one of the stars on a reality TV show, like maybe think twice about texting all of that. Not to say like don't do it because you're being, but like there should. I find it interesting when people lose it like on reality shows because I'm like that's what they or couples that get in arguments. I'm like that's what's happening on camera. Like there are cameras there. Like what's happening when cameras aren't there. Now, granted, he didn't do that on camera. She's telling other people about the text. She's crying. He knows the cameras are on her when he's saying that on the phone and she's crying outside of the Chippendales. There's like no question of like, okay, yeah, this is I'm going to be monitored in a way that and observed. Um,
Well,
so
there's,
then that tells you how also maybe pervasive it is to me.
yeah. Yeah, because there's like this old idea that, like people don't yell at their boss, but they go home and yell at their family. And what does that mean? And what does that look like or whatever? But like this is somebody who sounds like they would yell at their boss. You know what I mean? It's like the level of risk to you socially is so much higher when you're yelling at a person who's on a reality TV show and has this platform and you still can't hold it in. He's a bad father.
He has no values.
He has no value. I mean, that's what I would worry about. I'm like, oh, if you're doing that, I guess I would translate it to fatherhood in this way because I would just be like, well, you don't seem like a safe person. But
Well, that's when it seems like we're venturing more in that narcissistic realm, is when it becomes so overt that you are just doing it to like you are yelling like that to people at restaurants or
mm,
the dry cleaners. And I actually know someone who's I'm fairly certain, again, not supposed to diagnose people, but you can speculate, we can speculate like maybe this person that I know, I'm like fairly confident they have narcissistic personality disorder or just narcissistic tendencies. It doesn't matter if the PD is there or not. He was not allowed to coach his kids like softball team anymore because of his behavior. He was told not to come back to like a dry cleaners because of the way he treated. I mean, it
wow.
was remarkable. It was everywhere. So
Yeah.
anyway, but
So that's that episode. So we've got one more episode after this where we can kind of see what the aftermath is and we'll find out what Whitney decides and we'll see if Mom Talk is going to stay together.
yes, yep. Will they survive this?
Good
Let
to
me
be
just
with you, Dr. Jones.
Good seeing you, Dr. Brimhall. Until next time.
Bye.